say they don't care.
Good morning. My name is Dale Sorensen,
Who's Dale Sorensen?
representing the Adult Education Committee, and we are here for the final program of our year in adult education, and we have saved the most important program for the last. Today, Mark Smiley is going to bring us to a climax on the subject of cultivating care in a Christian community. Mark?
Hello, you all are spread out in such a way that I'm going to have to be doing a lot of this. So, and I know John's going to sit in his favorite spot, which is at the end of that row. Oh, you're going to come here. Terrific. And Carla, thank you all for coming today. This is the third session of 3, as you mentioned, and we'll focus today on cultivating a community of care. We do want to think a little bit about what we've done to get here. So we'll put what we'll talk about today in context. But I am very grateful to the Adult Ed Committee, to Dale and to Marcia, who I've been working with directly to make this happen, and also to Phil, who's played a very important role in speaking about the scriptural and theological foundations of caring. And part 3 of his contribution is caring in the words and actions of Jesus and Paul. And so that should come sometime today, I hope. Anyway, what I'd like to do today is just speak a little bit about the takeaways from the first 2, and then to think about, Phil will add his part, and then I would like to spend most of our time today thinking about the whole idea of cultivation and why thinking about cultivation could be particularly important rather than thinking about this kind of change and development working any other way. And then to begin looking and highlighting at some practices for cultivating caring community. All right? As we said in the first session, the objective of this series is to bring some perspective, some additional information that can be used to continue the work that the congregation has begun on creating caring community here at First United. So I viewed this as a way to provide resources, additional information, and really help support the activities that we have begun and to see those activities grow. So let's take a look at some takeaways from the first class, which was focused on why should we care about caring, which we said it seemed sort of axiomatic that we all care about caring, but yeah, we're not really sure why this is important. But it is important to establish why it's important, because it gives us motivation, it gives us focus, it gives us imperative to go about our work. And so we spoke about really how important caring is as an intrinsic good, part of the human condition. We spoke about a range of benefits, outcomes, positive outcomes, the alternatives acceptable, there are assumptions that we need to confront, not fall into the traps of some of these assumptions, like, for example, just because a school is a school doesn't necessarily mean it's caring, right? Even though we might think it's supposed to be because it's a school. Same thing with a church. The other thing that was very important that we mentioned is that we have a history of making caring and caring community a priority in this church. From the strategic plan that was developed and adopted in 2017, through the ministry outlines of the last couple of years, and indeed in one of the things that I thought was truly wonderful, when we passed those index cards around, you remember? And on one side, you wrote about the things that caring does for you, or how it makes you feel. And I did this word cloud that we looked at in some detail last week. And some pretty cool words up there, right? And then on the other side of your card, you wrote about what non-caring would do, or the absence of caring. And I think we all were of one mind that we're not so comfortable about this word cloud, are we? We'd much rather pursue that word cloud. And that is another reason why we should care about caring. In our second session, we spent time trying to figure out what we mean by care and caring community. So we unpacked this idea of caring community, looked particularly at the concept of care, and then community, and then we put the two together. The reason we did that is that it's very hard to mount a concerted effort to create something if you don't know what that something is. Or at least if you haven't settled on some kind of shared definition of the it that you are pursuing. And so there are many different ways to define care and community and caring community, but there are some important sort of principles and themes that we spoke about before. And importantly, we spoke about caring really as a quality of human relationship. Not only to care about something and to give care, but also to think about the matter, the manner, and the motivation, or the being caring of not only other people, but also the community, and we could sort of go beyond the community as well. But here we're speaking primarily about the community itself. We spoke about a whole system of virtues, positive virtues and mindsets, aims of caring, knowledge and skills that form this wonderful sort of stew that would lead us to caring action and interaction. And we spoke about the importance of competent action and interaction and reflective action and interaction. And then we put them both together, or to think about community, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit ahead of myself. But the community is really a strong sense of bond, of social relatedness that people have. It's born of shared understanding, shared values, but also common activities to achieve shared purposes. We spoke about a number of other things here too, but one point that we made that was important, I wanted to raise this again, is the concept of community is kind of content neutral. We haven't really defined what the values are, what the mindsets are, what the projects or the aims are that bind people together or that give them an identity of a we. Right? When we just talk about community, communities can come together around all kinds of different things, right? And sometimes they can come around, they can develop around a set of values that we don't find particularly useful. All right, so we think about the notion of community as being, let's say, content neutral. Is that fair enough to say? All right. Now, what we do when we get to caring community is we introduce content of caring to the definition of community. And so what we say in a caring community is that caring becomes a bright through line, a definitional quality of what that community is. So we take all the things that we did around the definition and the meaning of caring, we plug it in to community, and that becomes sort of a signature, a definition of the identity of the we. It becomes part of everything that the community does, but also what the community is, sort of a state of being of the community itself. Other important things is that a caring community organizes itself to promote caring, and it actively promotes the caring of individual members of that, or citizens of that community. I kind of like that idea to think about. Citizenry of community, not simply members. It connotes some important things. So, this is where we were before, and we come together today to talk about basically the question. If we're able to assemble, to get some idea about the caring community we'd like to have, how do we go about getting it? And that will be the primary focus today. I wanted to share with you two things to illustrate some important points from previous sessions. One is this, and I call this slide a gross misunderstanding of caring. And when we would take this material out to school people, I can remember a principal saying in a workshop, this is the lament you hear a lot when you go out into the field, and there's some truth to it, okay? But this poor principal, bless his heart, says, all this stuff really sounds great. My plate is full. I have absolutely no idea how I would add one more thing to all the things that I have to do right now. right? You probably have heard a variation on that lament before in your work, your professional pursuits, even maybe around here, okay? But he's wrong, because caring isn't something else you do, it is how you do the things you're doing now. Plus some other things, maybe, to really get that caring going. But it's really reshaping what the community is now. It's reshaping, filtering through those antecedents, through those virtues, through those mindsets, all the action and interaction of what people are doing already. Does that make sense? That's why this core principle, we had to talk about that quite a bit. And I hope that he came to understand that this is really a quality of what we do. It's not an add-on. It's not a separate domain from everything else the community does. Here's another one that I saw this just the other day. And we talked about competent action. This is a really good example of what we might call incompetent. And I don't mean that in I do kind of in a disparaging way. I think this is really stupid. But anyway, we also said last week, you remember, we're going to screw up, right? Caring is imprecise, it's prone to error, it's messy. We all know that. This is particularly egregious. This comes from my alma mater, Peabody College at Vanderbilt University, where I got my doctorate. And it is from an email that the Peabody administrator sent to students in response to the mass shooting in Michigan State in 2023. You remember that, the shooting in Michigan State? Okay. So, toward the conclusion of the memo, this is what's written. Off to a pretty decent start. Let us come together as a community to reaffirm our commitment to caring for one another and promoting a culture of inclusivity on our campus. By doing so, we can honor the victims of this tragedy and work toward a safer, more compassionate future for all. All right? Yes! And then the fine print. In parentheses, paraphrase from OpenAI's ChatGPT language model, personal communication, February 15, 2023, which was just days before the memo or the email was issued. So when I saw this, I put my head in my hands and I said, oh, you gotta be kidding me. This is so wrong on so many different levels. It's so incompetent. Not that the administrators who sent this out are bad people. Two things that are wrong with this. What are they?
Well, my question is, why is that little, the fine print even in there?
Boom. Okay. All right. Yes. There was a lack of care to proofread this thing and get rid of the attribution. All right.
Do they think?
Did you say that this was 2 days before the shooting?
Yes.
After.
Yeah.
Or 2 days
After. Yeah.
But
They wanted to get a response out fast.
But the paraphrase was 2 days before, right?
Right. Yeah. They went on Open Chat, AI Chat
And found
GPT,
something, yeah.
found something that was generated, plugged it into a letter. However, what they cut and pasted had the little byline on it. So the fact that they didn't catch it, they didn't retype it without the byline, problem. That's a problem. That's uncaring. I would not consider this to be caring if I was on the receiving end of this. But there's another really big problem with this.
That they used AI at all.
That they used AI at all
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely.
for a message that calls for this sort of stuff.
That's right. That's right.
Right? I mean, this is just, who in the world uses OpenAI, ChatGPT, to write a letter calling for care and compassion?
The same person that uses it to write a love letter to their wife.
That's right. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Write a love letter to your wife.
And the students were all over this, just instantaneously.
Of course.
The administrators stepped in.
No kidding. Wow. Bye-bye.
No kidding. In fact, the whole article about this is in today's Times, the paper version of today's Times. So anyway, I wanted to bring you these two examples to show you caring is not a separate domain of what we do. there's budgeting and caring. Caring is how we budget. Okay? There's governance in caring. Caring is how we govern. Okay? You see. And then, of course, this is just, you just got to be careful. And this is a really good time to turn it over to Phil. Phil, I'm so glad this guy agreed to be a partner in this. And we said, look, I said this, you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is important to me, but I'd really like for this to be something that's more and different than what I might do at the public library. And what I wanted to do was to bring to you all, congregants of this place, something that is related to why we congregate. Something related to scripture, to theology, to anchor this stuff that I could bring from outside of this profession, outside of this area in which we congregate, to try to inform. And so I've been thrilled, Phil, for your participation in this, and I think it really does add a lot of value to how we're thinking about this. So anyway, take it away, and then we'll resume.
Okay, so we've
cultivation.
heard how caring, even in the secular world, has to be thought of as foundational, not an appendage. It's not a stick-on. It's essential. And I'm just going to say that it is the foundational DNA of our faith story, and that's what I've been presenting for the last couple of weeks. So let's just take a look at the arc, because we're going to take it fast forward. But the arc of the story is a God who cares about slaves. That has to be shocking. So it starts at that kind of shocking point. God, that had never even been thought of before, right? We've been through that, so I don't need to repeat that. God who cares about slaves, back then, to Jesus, who in our Maundy Thursday service every year, we hear the story. Jesus takes on the role of a slave, washes the disciples' feet. So it's from God who cares to Jesus taking on the role, right? Paul, because I said I was going to bring it up to Jesus and Paul. Paul, who writes a whole letter, the whole letter of Philemon, probably not one of our best known epistles, the whole letter to Philemon, who was a slave owner, talking about his slave, Onesimus, I think if I'm saying that correctly, who was a runaway slave. We know what happens to runaway slaves. It's not pretty. Paul is advocating on behalf of the runaway slave for Philemon to consider him a brother in the Lord. Slave to brother in the Lord. Okay? That's a huge arc. From a God who cares about slaves to Jesus, who, Matthew 25, one of Progressive Church's favorite chapters in the whole Bible, where Jesus, one-to-one, identifies with the quote-unquote least of these. So it's from cares about to I am that. The I am God in the burning bush, I am what I am. In Jesus, I am the least of these. Right? So you just see the arc, where that goes from. So, and then also this whole idea, when you have those powerful and capricious gods, we talked about, the arbitrary and capricious power. You sacrifice to them. You will do whatever you need to do to get on their good side, right? The history of human sacrifice is a kind of an ugly history in humankind. That we will do anything to get on the good side of the powers that be. Sacrifice. Even our firstborn babies. Think of that. That's how important it is to get on the good side of the powers that be. In our story, and especially in Paul, this whole narrative is simply flipped, and it's a story of a God who sacrifices for us. Sacrifices either himself or his own firstborn son for us. You talk about a flipped narrative that should be eye-popping to all of us about how essential and basic this whole idea of caring is. And then we have to just pay attention to the fact that caring, the world is not divided up between those who care and those who don't. That's not the way the world is divided up, because it is human to care. The difference is the object of the care. It's very natural for us to care about ourselves. We have a high order ability to care for ourselves and those that we think of as an extension of ourselves. It's no trouble at all for me to care about my baby daughter. Right? That's not a stretch. That's not hard. You know, us, family, identity groups, that's kind of natural, built into the human thing. But to care for the defined other, see, that's the difference. That's the separating in this care thing, the defined other. And so we've called this, to care for the other, I'm going to say, requires a call. And that's why my dear friend Mark told me to talk about called to care. Because it's not natural. It comes from a voice outside ourselves, and it's kind of unnatural from the inside. So, Moses, here's a voice from outside himself. Moses already had a family, had kids, a wife, was doing okay, right? Here's this call to care for people he did not naturally care for or about. Slaves in Egypt. To go back to Egypt, implore Pharaoh to let these slaves go. Caring, acting on their behalf. That's the divide. Care of slave types, the bottom people. If we're going to, but then here's how this whole story kind of just expanded and blew up. If we're going to stretch ourselves to hear a call for them, it becomes this thing that, you know, it's kind of, once it's let out, it's hard to then contain it. This care for slaves, then, you know, where do you stop? Where do you stop it? It expanded to, you know, widows, orphans, strangers at the gate, refugees. All of these things become the suitable object for this caring enterprise. And then let's just remember what we talked about before, how the basis of our whole faith caring story is rooted in covenant. What is covenant? It's agreements between perceived equals. That is completely different than the domination model, where I won the war. Now, you know, the domination model is completely different. A God who makes agreements with us as you make agreements with an equal. That is mind-blowing in the world's theology of domination, right? And this covenant relationship backed up with, well, let's just establish some rules. Just the order, laws. And it's not the laws, again, of domination. It's the rules of covenant. Just how we're going to get along, how we're going to respect and honor each other. So covenant and rules become, they set norms of how we are going to treat each other, with the underlying question, or the underlying thing, is always, remember that we were once slaves in Egypt. Generations later, people who had never been a slave, remember that you were once a slave. Remember how it felt. So all of our caring for other is based on remembering how it felt. Pay attention to that. It's a good place to start. How does it feel to be at the bottom? So, now I want to get back to our resident expert here, but I want to just take, to say, let's be careful. Let's be careful, because we've seen in our own story how slippery caregiving is, and how it can be turned, and we can want to appear caregiving, while at the same time we're undermining the caregiving that we're trying to do. So the appearance, performative caregiving, virtue signaling caregiving. We've been very good at this. Jesus calls out, you know, that performative righteousness kind of thing. Jesus calls out the Pharisees for doing this. Watch out for the scribes. Listen to this. Watch out for the scribes. They love to walk around in long robes, to receive greetings in the marketplace, and to have the chief seats in the synagogue. See, they love the places of honor at the banquets, yet they defraud widows of their houses. Right? And for a show make lengthy prayers. He's calling them out on that performative righteousness kind of that aspect. I'm just going to say, and then I'm going to step down. We live in an age of performative righteousness. Maybe it's always been with us. Maybe it's always there. But I believe that people of faith have to have the eyes to see it and call it out. There is performative righteousness on the right. Put the Bible back in classrooms. Don't kick God out of the classroom. But do they ever read it? Right? The performative aspect, we want to look all this, but don't read it. All the while they're doing the actual things of raw power, politics, domination, right? Performative righteousness. It's easy for us to see that. Performative righteousness on the left. Wrapping pure, raw power politics in the language of justice-y stuff. It's done all the time. The words, the oppressed, the marginalized, the poor, have all become categories for the left to do performative righteousness. I'm going to say, one of the reasons I'm going to say that broadly, lost the last election was because of the performative righteousness around the poor. There was a whole bunch of people who were the elites, who were doing stuff about the poor, who didn't know any poor people. They never sat down with a poor person and heard what their struggles were. And so there was assumptions about, we've got the poor vote, but it just didn't happen because these people didn't know any poor people and didn't know what they were facing. And so what happened is they believed their lies over their lives. Performative righteousness on the left. It's harder for us to see it, I'm going to say, but that's why it's most important for us to see it. It's easy for us to see the performative righteousness on the right. And if I'm not ignoring some folks here, I apologize for that, because I think that we're a pretty progressive group of people, generally speaking. But I think we have to be careful of our own blindness and our own performative stuff, because it can get in the way of real caring. And with that, I'm going to step before the tomatoes start.
Thank you, Phil. That's actually a very good place to make a very important point, is that when we were distinguishing between caring about and giving care, and then we create this kind of murky third category of being caring of, that had to do with the matter, the manner, and the motivation. This is a pathway through performative caring about and performative caregiving. And key to being caring of is knowing authentically those within, you're in communion, you're in congregation. How in the world can you be genuinely caring in your thinking, in your actions, and in your interactions if you don't know well those with whom you live in community, family, or whatever? You can't, no matter how well-intended you are. It's very hard to know what your needs are, what your fears are, what your joys are, what your projects are, unless you come to know the other pretty well. And that is a very important task of a community of care, is to create those kinds of opportunities for us to know one another very, very well, so that we can be genuinely caring of each other, well beyond performative care. That's the challenge. So Phil, thank you. That was really a great place to leave it, because that's a huge point. So let's get to the subject right now of cultivating a community of care. I just put this in this morning because there is so much we could talk about what you could do, how you do it, how leadership needs to function in trying to cultivate a community of care. So we're just going to scratch the surface. We have to fly through some things. That's fine. There's always more conversation to be had. I hope we'll get a worm or two this morning when we scratch. That's why I like this slide, have the rake and the worm. You get it. So I think we should actually start here, because, and I want to ask you about these questions. Why cultivation? This, by the way, is the beautiful Van Gogh painting of the olive grove. Okay, some scriptural stuff like that. And the importance of cultivation to olives. So, cultivation, diving into cultivation a little bit, is not only the matter of the how we work to try to bring about caring community, but it also suggests some what's, some things that we need to do. Okay? But let me turn it to you as beyond sort of identifying some hows and whats. Why cultivation? There are lots of other images, lots of other words. Construct is one. Why don't we focus in on, what do you think we did in our work, but why might this not be a bad choice? Any ideas?
Nurturing and watering, and you plant and you nurture and water to get the thing to grow, cultivation.
It's a growth and development thing. Yeah, Sue.
I think when you're cultivating, I have relatives who are farmers, they're digging deep into the soil, they're working it, and trying to fertilize it while they're working it, giving air to it, opening up.
Yeah, that's right. It requires working the soil, creating an environment for growth and development. Yeah, it's, Paul?
And it's responsive to what you see. If the soil is dry, you add water. If you see insects, you do a treatment,
It's a very interactive sort of thing, not only with that which you're trying to grow, but the environment that is absolutely essential for growth to occur. Yeah.
The result is food, something that nurtures us. That's the elephant in the room here, right?
Well, isn't that what we're after? We're after that word cloud that we all like, and not the word cloud we don't. All right, this is making a great deal of sense. I mean, when we're thinking about it, it's very much the same sort of thing. So let me just share with you a little bit why we picked up on it and why I think it was particularly relevant. And this is me. This is being the son of a Presbyterian minister and seminarian, and breaking 4 generations of Presbyterian ministers, something like that. But I liked it. I worked with 2 other people on this project. I liked it in particular as an agricultural, for reasons that you said. But I also liked the kind of the scriptural relevance of it. Okay? Cultivation. I also liked because it refers to all manner of different dimensions of our growth and development, as you all are saying, from spiritual to social, relational to communal, and it relates to living things. Right? The other thing that I liked about it, as you all are suggesting, Sue, give us an image of work, is that this really aligns well with the work that we found is necessary to cultivate caring community. And it speaks to the nature of leadership that's required, the kind of the how. You have to be a farmer, right? You've got to be a farmer. So you can't not do this without Grant Wood. By the way, that's Grant Wood's dentist, if you didn't know, who sort of posed for the picture. But anyway, if you go there, then the question becomes, so what does cultivation actually involve? What are the things that one needs to do to effectively cultivate something? And this is where, Sue, your comments in particular started us going in that direction. Paul, yours as well. You hit on some some things that we need to do to cultivate effectively, successfully. So, other thoughts about what we need to do to cultivate something in sort of an agricultural sense? Yeah,
Well,
Sarah?
I know that, kind of growing up on a farm, there's fallow periods where everything's resting and you're developing a plan for the future and nurturing.
It's continual, isn't it? It doesn't stop. It doesn't have a, okay, we got it now, I'm done. It's a continual thing. It's unpredictable, even though the fields are resting. Other work has to go on in preparation for the next thing. Very good. Sally?
You have to know your plants. Every plant is different. You have to know what each plant needs for its own growth and development.
Yeah. You gotta know what the heck you're cultivating and the needs of what it is that you're cultivating. Gene?
Yeah, I'm picking up on I've had a similar thought. It might be important to pick your plants because, for example, you might pick an annual that will grow for a period of time and then be gone.
Right.
Or you might plant an aspen, and in due time, you've got a forest of aspens.
Yeah. Or heaven forbid that you have chosen bamboo. Yeah, Paul.
Well, and you need to plant the seeds. Nothing starts
the
unless you
seeds.
plant the seeds.
That's right. You all, this side of the room, are awfully quiet. Len, you and I talked about that, kind of hiding in that. These guys are right in the zone. You guys aren't. So what about it? Yeah, we got one thing to offer on from this side of the room. Art, thank you.
You asked a question a couple of slides ago. You asked about choosing the metaphor of cultivation.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about alternative models that we could have chosen.
Yeah, yeah.
And then what that popped into my mind is business planning, which doesn't get you there. And you could, you really have to sit down and think about how business planning compared to agricultural planning gets you where you need to go. Or can business plan ultimately get you where you need to go?
Yes, there are some contrasts, but there is an argument that cultivation needs to include sort of technical, rational components, particularly in some of the decision-making that you're talking about. If we just pick up on what Sarah said, is that when the fields are resting, it's a lot of stuff that you need to do to organize in order to, get your resources straight, doing all this stuff, go pay off the seed store. I mean, I don't know, I've never been a farmer. But, but yes, it does take that into account, but your point is absolutely right. Sort of the technical, rational stuff of business planning can take some of essential qualities of this work out. And what cultivation does is try to be much more inclusive of the things that are growth and development oriented and that are innately social and human. So, these are just an outline of things, and we can say a word or two about each of them as we grow. You all have pretty much named them all. But preparing the soil is huge. It's like scraping your house, right, before you paint it. I mean, you got to get the field ready to receive the seed. You have to plant the seed, plant the saplings, plant the seedlings. You have to nurture it. You have to water, you have to feed, and whatever else you need to do to nurture the growth of the plants. You need to guide growth. And I think maybe for some plants you don't need to worry about that. But many of them you do, which means you need perhaps use trellising. You may need to do some pruning. Eek. Pruning. And you need to mitigate threats. Weeds, pests, other things. There's certain things you can't control. You can't necessarily control the weather, but you can work to mitigate it. Maybe you install irrigation, but you work to mitigate the threats to the effort and to the community you're creating. Okay? So it lines really well with the work. This is really the hub of the work of creating caring community. Does that make sense? And so we gravitate toward the image of growth, development, and cultivation.
Can I make a comment that's maybe out of order at this point? I've been out of order before. I have a certain sympathy with that very original principle, because the prepare the soil is what he or she probably was talking about, that I don't have room on my plate for another thing. Your point was absolutely right about it isn't doing a new thing, it's the way you do the thing you do.
Right.
But I think here in our community and anywhere is this notion of preparing the soil, of getting ready to do what we want to do so that we all, I don't know, I mean, there's a lot that goes into preparing the soil. So I think we're kind of there in this whole discussion. And it does require some attention and work that is beyond what you're already doing.
Well, one of the things I will get to very shortly is that a very important thing that you need for successful cultivation is you need cultivators.
Well, true.
And so I look here, and particularly all of you who have come 3 times. Wonderful. You all could be wonderful cultivators. You represent a rather small percentage of the whole community. And so one of the big principles of organizational development, community development, is really to prepare to get the community ready. There's a train a-coming. And so what that means is to develop all sorts of things, awareness, a sense of problem, purpose, imperative, to actually do something, to not simply talk about it, but to actually do it. And this could be fairly complicated work, it's long-term work, and it could be painful work. Because to do it well, you kind of got to get into the things that we think are caring, but may not be so much. Okay, so there is, look at any of the change literature, and preparedness is huge. Now, it doesn't mean you have to get everybody ready before you start anything, but it certainly means that you have to bring people into the effort, you have to impress upon them the importance of doing it, and you have to solidify the commitment that, by dang, we're going for it. Right? And bring them along with you.
Mark, I think the environment sometimes will let us get a crop without having perfect farming techniques. So my job in our family was the grass.
Yeah.
And when there was a bare spot, I would get my fish fork out and dig it up and throw some seed on. My wife was appalled. I did a little more than that. I put some water on. And we live in this beautiful climate where the rain is pretty regular. And I got grass. And I was not a very good farmer. And I made sure the grass got cut. But I think there are seeds, some seeds that come up very easily.
Sure.
If you're willing to put them in the soil
Well,
and give them a little water.
and if you match your seed to your environment, and you know your environment,
Yeah.
which gets back to some technical rational stuff, is that I would argue, and I will later if we get to it this morning, that part of what we really have to do is assess this environment.
So I think there are people that you can reach out to, and you may be shocked what can happen in
Oh, yeah.
a 15-minute conversation or 2 15-minute conversations.
Right. Well, part of this, I hope you all realize, this framing of this is to both encourage the small and the whole. Meaning, it would be wonderful for this whole congregational community to be a whole community of care. There are sites in every place, including there are wonderful small opportunities and groups for care. And how fortunate you are if you're a member of one of those. If not, okay. But the challenge for a school, for a congregation, is how does one push this out to define the whole of the we, and not simply if you're lucky enough to have a social relationship with this group of 3 or 4 people. And now, bingo, you got it. So there's a real interesting challenge, I think, for us. I'm going to skip this one because we've already talked about sort of what the some necessary ingredients are for successful cultivation. The environment, the seed, the match, the knowledge and understanding of cultivation of that which you're trying to cultivate, having the right tools, having the right resources, understanding how everything from the seasons work to what you got to plant, what you got to leave fallow, all this sort of stuff is very important. And I mentioned before, successful cultivation depends upon cultivators who really have a good sense of what they're doing. We'll get to that in just a moment. But I think we have to remember again, kind of this loop back of what it is that we're really trying to cultivate. It's like, what is the plant? What is the living being that we want to try to grow and to develop? And it really is this community that is infused and defined by these positive virtues and mindsets of caring, the aims of caring, which, Phil, you said it, the betterment of others, right? And not in some kind of ranked order that you need someone like Pope Francis to take down a high-ranking official from another company to, remember when J.D. Vance went to talk to Pope Francis, and he said, no, that's not the way you should understand this thing about who you take care of first and second. We take care of everybody.
Yeah.
Okay? So, anyway.
That's really a good example.
Yeah, right? I mean, Phil, it fits exactly what you said. It's not family first, and then after family, my neighborhood, then after neighborhood, my country, and then if there's anything left, the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I'll make another distinction on that. It's, we tend to have an ability to love our own ideas more than we love people. And so we're very committed to that. And that's what happened with the laws around the Sabbath. There was a whole group of people who were very committed to Sabbath laws, but they forgot why the Sabbath existed, and the Sabbath existed for people. And so always remembering that it is people that our caring should be directed toward, because we have a high level propensity to use political ideas and be committed to them over and against people.
Right. Right.
So what are we committed to? What do we care about? Political ideas or people? That's the rub here, I think, in the real world. And that's the one that I think surfaced in that Pope exchange.
Right. Well, and that's why it all hinges on our understanding of the aims of caring. The aims of caring, to which you bring that constellation of virtues and mindsets, which you bring knowledge and understanding of the other, which you bring all these things. It gives you the power to act and interact in caring manner, right? But if you lose sight of the aim, then it doesn't happen. It doesn't work very well. You get trapped by other things. You get co-opted, if you will, by other things. We haven't really dove into some specific things about caring or ways we practice caring that we want to cultivate, because we're actually interested not only in trying to cultivate those antecedents, we really would like to cultivate action and interaction, right? How we need to be, what we need to do to be caring of those in the community. And so I wanted to share a couple of things with you that goes back to this idea of what we need to do to be truly understanding, authentically understanding of other people, and how we interact and work with them. And so I jotted down a few things that we found across the wide varieties of literature, and I think they make some sense. I mean, one practice is the practice of presence, okay? Which is huge. I mean, you think, well, duh, okay. But number one, you have to show up. Just be there. That's really important. That conveys all sorts of care to people. You also have to be mindful. This is something that when we talk to school leaders, for example, everything you do, filter it through this presence, mindful presence of thinking about how this is going to affect the betterment of others. So all right, so we can try to cultivate these notions, these practices of presence Yeah, just show up. Principals are really good at that. They show up at everything. High school principals. Or they do their best. I see Marcia smiling because she knows all about how this works. Attentiveness, observation, listening, humble inquiry. These are all practices to help you understand, learn about, and authentically understand other people. Right? How you engage humble inquiry is a concept I love. The subtitle of this essay by Edgar Schein, who's a big organizational and management guy, Humble Inquiry, on the gentle art of asking rather than telling. It's a book for managers. If I'd run across it while I was teaching administrative theory and leadership for education and nonprofits, I would make people read that. I'd tell them they had to read it. But it's really fascinating to how you lead with questions and humble inquiry. And then, of course, how you listen well. How we communicate with each other. You know, how we practice the practices of consideration, which I think are absolutely huge. Like everything from general kindness, trustworthiness, dependability. I love dependability. Show up on time. Show some respect. If someone's coming to see you at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a student, dagnabbit, you be there 10 minutes before 1. All right? Show some consideration. Notice people. Call them by name. Lovely practices of consideration. Then the acting on behalf of others, areas we could cultivate too. Again, discernment of need, and then how you provide help and care, or refer people to the help and care that they may need. There is sort of a Clint Eastwood maxim associated with caregiving, which is every man, as he said, every person's got to know their limitations. Right? I'm a school leader. I'm not a clinical psychologist. But I know plenty of clinical psychologists. Here's some phone numbers. I may even call ahead. The practice of giving grace and forgiveness, I think is huge. And I think the practices of little things that matter a lot. It's all the pleases and thank yous in the world. Little things matter big time in community. But these are practices that we can cultivate, right, as part of developing community. I do need to say this because while there is sort of a technical rational dimension to this, you've got to figure out what goals and objectives are. You've got to figure out how you're going to organize action to accomplish them, how you're going to assess, do all these sorts of things. There are some things that we really need to understand. First of all, there are no scripts. There's no recipe. It's kind of like not driving a car on a road with curbs. It's like we're sailing a boat or we're flying a plane. A single engine plane where you look out and say, oh, the airport's over here. Right? Or you're sailing a boat. There are many means that could work in different situations. And that's important to recognize. We would create our own care, our own meaning, our own set of activities, our own approaches to this. And the thing I loved was an article that came across it. Every community, every caring community we develop has got to be a custom job. All right? We can't look and see, ooh, that church down the street looks like a really great caring community. We want to be like Mike. You know, Michael Jordan, be like Mike. And guess what? We just talked to their council, and we know how they did it. Let's just do the same thing. No, that's not. You can learn, but that's not the way this works. Each effort is its own custom job. And about that, we wrote, while myriad programs and activities can make a difference, cultivating caring community depends fundamentally on concerted efforts to develop underlying knowledge, skills, and attitudes. It involves systemically shaping organizational conditions to animate members' capacity for relationships that bring caring community to life. Bob.
I can't help but think that this all relates to political campaigns.
It does. It does. In fact, some of the richest literature that we found on this was in campaigning and community development. Okay? There's a very wonderful rich from the Saul Alinsky model to a number of things, particularly around process and the things that you need to establish in order to make that kind of development work. There were some very interesting parallels and lessons that we brought into this work. So yes, that's right. Thank you for drawing that connection.
I mean, all of this is applicable to how to do it right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, you know, we kind of have some understanding about how to do this well, but sometimes we need to sort of organize ourselves around what we understand from other people's efforts, from stuff that's been around for a while, and see what makes sense for us in terms of the sort of community we would like to cultivate.
Can I jump in on it?
Yeah.
In terms of political campaigning?
Yeah.
Here's one of the things, again, I think we have to be careful of, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all, but it's the old saying.
It's better.
I'm not taking you on, especially publicly. I'm not taking. But here's the old thing, you know, in politics and other things, it's all about sincerity and authenticity. And once you can fake that, you've got it made.
I understand.
Right?
But it's
And
not
so
always
if the
fair.
political campaign is to just use some of these things to appear caring, then it's manipulative and it's not genuinely caring.
Absolutely.
So,
Yep. And there will be detectors out there. And they're really tuned fine. So, but we won't have a chance to get to it, but campaign actually is part of an idea here, because one of the ways that I think you get ready and you keep people on track, you bring people into it, is really to begin a sustained campaign about why this is important, what we're doing, really cultivate shared meaning and motivation for doing this work. It helps to engage people. It's got to be authentic. It's not, again, it's not just saying it, it's selling it, and it's living the campaign. So the authenticity is absolutely key. You can't just put up a bunch of signs and say, okay, we did it, that's our campaign. It's got to be modeled, it's got to be seen as authentic, and folks have to say, this is what we're committed to do, and by gum, this is important.
You know, I think one of the things that we can say about this church is we attract people because we have a certain authenticity in terms of our mission work, who are, you know, that doesn't mean that we are doing the work we need to do within the community that you're talking about. But it does seem that we do God's work in many ways. People see that, and that attracts people. Now our job is to keep those people and know that they are seen and heard and cared about.
Yes, this does have an internal focus, all of this right now.
Yeah.
But they're very good arguments and a pretty decent bit of evidence that, well, next time you're on an airplane, really take seriously what they say about the oxygen masks. Put yours on yourself first,
Yeah.
or you're not going to be any good to anybody else.
Right. Yeah.
And so there is an importance and a very good argument that even we attend to many things outside this community,
That's right.
we're better at that when
are.
we have that community ourselves, and when it is seen and experienced as something very genuine. And so we have a lot more we can talk about, but we're pretty much out of time. But I did want to spend a good bit of time on this idea of cultivation, because it encapsulates so many important dimensions and some really concrete steps that I think that are necessary to plan for. Again, go back, this is where, and to develop some action steps that are really connected to what we hope to achieve, who we are, this place we find ourselves, that builds upon things that we value, that we now see related to the type of community that we're working to become, right? And engaging, participative, You need to bring people into this. And so there's much more we can talk about, but we are at the end of our time. I would like again to thank you all for being here over these last 3 weeks. Phil, again, I want to thank you for this partnership. It's been great. I say that genuinely, authentically. And I want to thank Dale and Marcia. So thank you all very much.
And I want to thank Mark and Phil for doing this. I think this is. Keith, thank you for being here for 3 weeks. I want to thank you for being here for 9 months. And we'll be back on September 14th. Meanwhile, enjoy your summer.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you.
you.